the official development assistance, they have private sector financing, and then domestic resources. And we are saying, for example, private sector financing, we must unlock the resources to improve the business climate, to develop local markets. And with domestic resources, of course, we must unlock this one, and must build effective tax regimes and government institutions to improve public spending. That is very, very important. And on implementation, of course, we have talked of digitization and localization. Then in conclusion, as the world faces several difficulties within the economic, social, and environmental sectors, the number of people who are still impoverished exceeds 1 billion, the whole world over. Inequality and sustainable consumption and production have also been on the increase, and this has led to large economic and social costs that pose a threat to human and plant life on Earth. And of course, when people are not satisfied, are very hungry, definitely there is instability. Then to accomplish global sustainable development, the world requires enhanced financing and business opportunities that enhance economic growth and create more employment opportunities, while emphasizing the reinforcement of environmental protection. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, therefore, if we are to achieve SDGs, there is need to scale up strategies towards sustainable social, economic, and environmental systems through, 1, insightful policy reforms in institutions and governance systems, then 2, changing human behavior and societal norms. Human behavior. You find people have land, but they are very poor, they can't even eat. And yet with land, you can produce food for home consumption and even for sale. But we still have what the president called ideological disorientation, which links with tribal, religious, gender chauvinism, etc. This country here. It becomes a very big problem. So mindset change is a very big thing. If we still have, most people still have it in the rural areas especially, we shall not achieve SDGs. So this is where we should touch and make sure that we do that thing. And then having strong data innovations and systems will make us actually tell us where we are, then we work on those issues and achieve SDGs. Otherwise, I thank you very much for listening to me. SDGs, of course, is quite a lot because it concerns everything. It needs a lot of time, but that was just a small snapshot on exactly what is happening. Thank you very much. And of course, we must make sure that no one should be left behind. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. And indeed, you have ended up on a good note. Leave no one behind. He has treated us to the genesis of SDGs, which are now called Global Agenda, and how it evolved from the MDGs that seem to focus on developing countries. And I liked that they concern an individual 360 degrees all around, and he has taken us through how far we have gone as a country to get this done, particularly on indicators of performance up to 119, and then he has pointed to us a number of challenges that are being faced in this process. Now, our next presentation is Innovation for Sustainable Disaster Risk Management, a case of forecast-based financing for early actions and sustainable development by Mr. Robert Kwesiga. And Mr. Robert Kwesiga, matters of disaster, I think that is his menu, given that he's the boss of the Red Cross, and he's an economist with a master's in planning and has worked in a number of places, including Geneva in the International Red Cross, and has been head of the region in this Southern Africa, and initially worked with the Ministry of Planning in our country here. So we are going to be treated by somebody who has a very wide experience in the subject he's going to treat, and I take this opportunity to welcome you, and please applaud him as he comes.
the Red Cross is the lead agency in preventing Ebola and COVID. So I have to practice what we preach. Thank you very much. The leadership of UMI, I'm trying to avoid a list of mentioning each one in their respective titles. Dear delegates, invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, I mentioned that we are taking the lead in disseminating and doing risk communication this time around about Ebola, but also any other pandemic, including COVID, in the recent past. And I thought I should practice what we preach. I must start by stating that I don't have a PowerPoint presentation like my brother here. Reason being that I was briefed that I'm a member of the panel. And I thought being a member of the panel, then I don't have to make a PowerPoint presentation. But I think that makes it maybe easier for all of us that you are not going to focus on the screen, you have to look at the speaker. And maybe that makes a difference. Allow me to mention how we have a strong partnership with UMI, where we have transited from only doing humanitarian work, but using research to inform how we manage humanitarian work. And so our partnership with UMI, we cherish it, and is already adding a strong value to what we are doing in the humanitarian work as the Red Cross. Because we want to stop being reactive. You know, reactive is it has happened, we rush, but then at times we are not informed of how scientifically we can do it based on research, but also on how we can do operational research and document and publish all the humanitarian work we do in this country. For the Red Cross, those who may not know the Red Cross, we are a unique institution. We are not an NGO, but we are not government. We are established by government through legislation, by an act of parliament, but government doesn't control what we do. Very interesting. In the sense that our mandate, which comes from the international Geneva Conventions, makes us independent of government because we don't serve based on any criteria, whether it is race, whether it is religion, whether it is political affiliation. And that keeps us more or less rather unique, having our space, but at times we end up crashing depending on the powers that be. Having said that, coming on the rostrum for what my brother just mentioned on the sustainable goals, and my brief around sustainable innovations for disaster risk management, one can say, why are you talking of disaster management and in a sustainability manner? The truth of the matter is disasters globally and in Uganda, those who live in Uganda, they are on the increase. They're on the increase. The climate-triggered ones are escalating, and now we are back into the conflict-triggered ones. There was a bit of RAR. It was always small scale. But if you look at Africa, if you look at the world, again, the emergencies that are triggered by human actions because of conflict, they're on the increase. This year, I'm trying to avoid statistics to make sure I keep in time, Mr. Moderator. This year alone, already, this is the figures we have, which were like by August, September. The people who were directly affected, you see, you can talk of millions, but those who lost their livelihoods, who lost their dear ones, who lost the whatever they depend on, we are talking of almost 1 million this year alone, and we are still counting. Now, the question is, what is the best way of managing these disasters? And that's how we have come up with a strategy which we call forecast-based financing for area action and sustainable development. And what does this mean? It means that as disasters become more complex or complicated as well, it is necessary to look at how we can build disaster-resilient societies using innovations to mitigate and even reverse the impact of disasters. So how can we avert? How can we minimize? But worst case scenario, when it happens, how can we minimize loss of lives and property? Science has given us a window. Science has given us a window. Today, most of these are predicted. Science, now, you can easily tell that there is going to be floods, we are going to have drought. By the way, even wars now can be predicted. Depending on the decisions of the leaders, you can triangulate and know that these leaders, there is a likelihood of going to war. The way they are behaving, the way they are doing their business. And so, if science can help us do it, what tools have we developed to use that information and do what we call area actions? Now, area actions basically are around how can you prepare? How can you even make sure that in the worst case scenario, when it happens, then automatically the impact is going to be minimized. Now, one of the big questions we are struggling with is, supposing we invest and the disaster doesn't happen, then what happens to that investment? There is no forecast which is 100% correct that the disaster or the emergency is going to happen. It is not there. It is like the current Ebola we have in the country. Should you just take it rightly because the numbers are still few, or should you use a hammer to kill a mosquito? Or should you even start using guns to fire at it? Now, and that's the question which at times we struggle with, that supposing you do that investment and then it doesn't happen. The answer to that is, either way, the negative consequences of not preparing, the cost will always surpass the investment you put in area action. And why? When you invest in area action, that investment stays. If anything, you have empowered the community, you have empowered the people, you have improved the infrastructure. So you not take it away. It remains with the targeted people and the targeted community and the structures you have strengthened. Whereas the alternative of waiting for it to happen, you find the response mechanism, the response cost will always surpass more than 100 times, and research is there. I can give you the figures if we had time. Will always be almost 100 times more than when you invest in this forecast financing or area action. And so, how do we do that? And that's where we have entered partnerships with UMI. That's why we have bring academicians on board, that we work together and strengthen that forecast area action modalities, because we can be able to scientifically triangulate, scientifically predict, scientifically take decisions. Allow me to link something also which is about forecast, and this is what we call, should we continue giving relief of physical materials as it were? you know what that means? One can say, if the people in Bududa, we know every year they are going to get these disasters. So what should we do for their forecast? Should we go and give them blankets before? Should we go and give them food before it happens? You know, what does that mean? Now, another innovative tool we have come up with is what we call cash transfer mechanism, where you give people cash. And this is interesting even for the topic we have just gone through. And what do we mean by this cash mechanism? That unless the situation doesn't support it, but one, it gives people choice. It gives people choice. So you know the materials we normally give. It can be maize meal, it can be beans, it can be, but why do you assume that that's what the people want? Why do you assume that that's what people want? Two, it is cost effective. Cost effective. You cut out the logistics, the transportation, the distribution costs. And now with technology again, mobile money, you sit in Kampala, send money to people's phones, and they get the money. And you can imagine all that cost you cut out in the chain of managing that emergency. Three, it brings human dignity. You know, the people are not treated as numbers, because if you are a refugee, if you have been in a situation where you are displaced, people look at you 1, 2, 3. But now it is dignity. You are a person, you make choices of what fits you for your family or for yourself. But more importantly, it supports the economy. It supports the economy, especially the local economy. So, you can imagine, you know, a gift from the people of America, if you know those bags of posho, yellow posho, gift from I don't know what. But now, if you give people, they will buy from the local market. They will support the local producer. They will support the local trader. They will support the distribution chain in that locality. And so, I thought I should spend some minutes on this, that one of the tools of early action is giving people choices, and that's why we are talking of giving money. And this has been streamlined, and we are calling upon the academia to help us make it perfect. As I wrap up, because I see the gentleman there telling me that I'm used all my time. I wish I had more time, I would tell you a big story. Facts are that for every $10 spent on humanitarian relief, only one is spent on reducing risk. And we have to reverse this. Humanitarian system that save lives, we must make sure we look for ways of being proactive and not reactive. The biggest challenge is financing. Financing, because the financing is always around. It has happened, it has hit the media, it is in the news media, and everybody reacts. But how do we start changing that? It starts with our governments making investment in that, but also it starts from the development partners taking it as an area that has to be done that way. Also, in conclusion, the science has to build on the traditional mechanisms. People know. If you got any press, people know. Currently, in Kasese, we have put up these early warning actions. We know that River Nyamwamba is going to burst. But even the people know that it's going to burst. And how do we, using science, bring this all together? In conclusion, I must say that this is the way to go. We can't always treat emergencies or humanitarian action as a one and off. Disasters are here to stay. Emergencies are with us. We have to look at sustainable ways of how we can manage them. And some of the areas I've mentioned are the ones that we have already triggered, the one that we have already made functional, and by working with academia, by working with institutions like yours, we can do more, we can do better, we can save more lives. I thank you.
Give him a more firm clap. Also as a reward for managing within time. He has taken us through disaster and how it links up with sustainability, although they seem to be strange bedfellows because you don't want to sustain a disaster, and has told us a number of causes of disaster that could be natural, but more so also human triggered by war and other behavior that perhaps affects the environment. And particularly he points to livelihood, which is something that our specialist, who is going to be a discussant, will be touching. Aiming for resilience. When it happens, we can recover. But if we could prevent, much better, mitigate, or activate a plan of intervention. And I happen to have worked as a relief and rehabilitation officer in my early days. And if cash remittances were in place, I would never have been employed in this respect. But I see there was a lot of trouble. Good thing that you are getting rid of that, because it has a lot of things, including maybe difficulties of procurement. So he's emphasized proactive action, not reactive action. Now this takes us to our discussant, Professor Betty Claire Mubangizi, Director of Public Sector Transformation sub-theme, which we have had, but also works in South Africa in a very reputable university as a professor of public administration, and he's chair of research in sustainable local rural livelihood. And I think that's the catchphrase that brings her here in this particular discussion. I will not go to the details of the profile. She's been around with us for a while. May I now ask Professor to come and break it down for us before others can come in to raise questions. Thank you. That welcome was feeble, maybe a louder one.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Special greetings to the leaders of UMI and very noble, able presenters this morning. Allow me also to extend a special greetings to the students that are in our midst. We value your presence here because a few years from now, you're the ones who will be standing here. Colleagues, I take the opportunity also to greet our presenters this morning, Professor Alfred Byamujisha. Sincere apologies. Professor Albert Byamujisha and Mr. Robert Kwesiga. In my response to your presentations, I will not get into the details because I don't think I would do it service. I will instead place my response and discussion to the implications of their insights to policymakers, but also the implication of their presentation to research and to academia, because this is an academic conference. I'll briefly start with the insights from the Red Cross, which have been aptly delivered and shared with us by Mr. Kwesiga. We all are aware that donors provide humanitarian support after disasters. They get very, very busy and very visible. But largely, they fail to provide similar support for the reduction of disasters and the reduction of disaster risks. And what Mr. Kwesiga has just shared with us, I think is a breath of fresh air. it's a breath of fresh air, and I think it's something that is very welcome. We are hearing innovations to sustainably manage disasters and risks in the form of, forecast-based financing, engaging communities, ensuring accountability, enhancing data preparedness. All those are very, very innovative and I think very welcome responses. Then there's the cash voucher assistance. I think we will have big discussions around that. Cash voucher assistance. I mean, that cash might end up buying cigarettes and I don't know what. But anyway. My takeaway point from Mr. Kwesiga that I would want to highlight is kind of in form of a question. Can we think of disaster risk management in isolation from climate change adaptation? I think we should not and cannot separate the two. Disaster risk management should not and cannot be seen in isolation from climate change and adaptation, because we've seen that very many of the disasters we are seeing are, somehow have a leaning towards climate change. So how do we adapt to climate change? Because if we separate the two, we will fail to coordinate activities, resulting in the duplication of efforts, administrative inefficiencies, and competition amongst various groups. So for me, disaster risk management should be working in partnerships with things like the National Environment and Management Authority and all those structures in government, in civil society that have an interest in environment management. Coming to our second presenter, Professor Gambuuze, who has really given us details of sustainable development, looking at 3 dimensions. I think since the Brundtland Commission, all those several years ago, the concept of sustainable development has been adopted and, as a development paradigm, both globally and locally. We see it in so many UN and other international protocols. I mean, in the Millennium Development Goals and now in the Sustainable Development Goals, it's a common thread following through. But Professor Gambuuze's presentation points out the multi-dimensional and multifunctional nature aspects of this very, very, very complex relationship. The environment, the economy, society, those are very dense concepts, which, I mean, even as an academic, if you are to unpack them, they speak so much, they say a lot, and I don't know if they mean the same thing to the same people. I mean, for example, some will argue that economic activities are by nature extractive of the environment. So is it possible to have economic activities that at the same time support social development and support the economy? Yet we must and should look at the environment, the economy, and society as mutually reinforcing concepts, that there's a mutually reinforcing relationship between the environment, the economy, and society. We need to look at it from that perspective. So we have to see how economic growth can advance environmental and social objectives. How do we do this? We can't do it as business as usual, and something has to change. There are certain required preconditions that we need to interrogate, we need to unpack, we need to conceptualize, we need to research on if we are to have economic growth indeed advancing the environment and not extracting the environment. So what are the policy implications? From what the professor has shared with us, it is clear that Uganda has made really great strides. I mean, having, for example, the SDG Secretariat positioned at such a high office in the land is, to me, an indication that they are taking SDGs very seriously. Other policy implications are that clearly the demands for such an integrated development agenda, if you integrate economic aspect, environment and social development, it would mean that the focus on gross domestic product measures would have to somehow be replaced. So the metrics would have to change. You know how we measure economic development through gross domestic products and all those metrics. Now, if we still focus on the same metrics, then we will not know if we actually are achieving the environmental aspect and the social aspect. So I think the agenda on public policy will have to mean that the focus on gross domestic product as a measure of progress would have to be replaced by metrics that encompass the other dimensions of environment and of social development. It also means that policymakers must become adept at reconciling public and private interests. The private sector is what drives economic development. Generally, the private sector is more interested in the profit making, which sometimes might not reconcile with looking after the environment and looking at social inclusion and social development. So policymakers would have to be adept at being able to reconcile that, the public and the private interests. And when we speak of partnerships, indeed, which are very important when you want to bring these three dimensions into the development agenda, we need to look at, or policymakers need to look at partnerships with a very critical eye. Because when you are in a partnership, you don't always necessarily want the same thing. You might be interested in the same thing, but you may not necessarily be on the same page as to how to get to that end. So look at partnerships with a very critical eye. What are these partnerships bringing to the table? What do they want to get out of the table? And what actually is their interest? Is it in line with the public interests? So it also means that policymakers would need that enhanced capacity to be able to coordinate policies from different domains and different sectors. If you look at these prongs of the economic, social, and environmental development, by necessity, they draw from very different domains, different sectors of society. So the ability to coordinate those policies from different sectors and the capacity to engage different stakeholders with a very critical eye as to what these stakeholders are actually bringing to the table is something very important in terms of policy directions. Of course, we will require strengthened capacity to analyze and to evaluate various policy options. What are the trade-offs? We might say, what are the trade-offs as we pursue the three dimensions? Now, I also want to bring in an aspect of what the presenters have presented with respect to, am I about to go? Okay, I'll quickly rush through implications for the researchers. Implications for researchers, and I will take you perhaps to Public Administration 101, the policy formulation process. Look at all those and be able to interrogate what comes where. Agenda setting, how do we establish a shared vision and set an agenda for a win-win solutions for all parts of the population. The policy formulation processes. What are other policy alternatives if we are pursuing this three-pronged approach to development? And how can we bring them into fruition within very reasonable timescales? Policy implementation, and then lastly, policy monitoring and evaluation. We need to be able to define and to document and evaluate the success indicators of monitoring economic, social, and environmental dimensions of policy outcomes. Lastly, critical to researchers, critical to universities and institutions that are training public administrators and public servants, identify the debates and what the discourses are linking the three dimensions of economic, social, and environmental development. Critique the debates, critique what is going on in government, but also do it in a very responsible manner, being constructive criticism. Of course, also transdisciplinary, but not just transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary research teams are very important. There's a difference between transdisciplinary and multidisciplinary teams. Academics, we need to be able to identify that and see whom we can work with as we find best ways to implement this three-pronged approach. Local solutions and indigenous knowledge systems, let us not forget that. Our people have local solutions. There are indigenous knowledge systems on how to manage climate change, on how to adapt to climate change. Let us also draw on those local resources and find what is there to support and guide us. And then lastly, as I always say, ethical research, research in ethics. How you generate knowledge and how you disseminate it, it has to be shrouded in ethical processes and dimensions. Friends, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Pangizi, for treating two papers and in such short time. He has pointed to research and policy implications, and I think tools of prediction for disaster need to be interrogated with the environment. Maybe when you come back, Mr. Albert, you'll say something about that. And then SDGs for policymakers, can they review, especially policymakers, how measurements are done for economic growth vis-a-vis the other concerns of ecology and sociology? We have about 10 minutes to the end of our session, and this is time for people to give comments. And if we can do it so efficiently, if I could get somebody to move around with the mic and just name and then the comment or question, 1 minute, so that at least we have as many people, and then we have time for people on this side to do the responses. Can somebody help me? Yes, I see a hand there. And if you could direct a question to a particular respondent.
Yes, thank you, Doctor. Thank you, presenters. I'm called James Owachi. I work in Cabinet Secretariat in Office of the President. My comments are directed to Dr. Biamugisha. Doctor, you spoke well about partnerships. Partnerships, as we know, are actually SDG 17. This conference spent a bit of time on partnerships and how important it is for us to realize our development goals. The unfortunate thing that I want to observe about our experience with partnerships in Uganda is the fact that we have been able to attract and to engage with it in such a manner that it has been quite unfavorable to us. It has exaggerated our debt burden that we know, and we are worried about whether we are not doing it right or we are getting the wrong partners or whatever it is. So what can we do better in this area? We acknowledge that without these partnerships and without probably doing it better, we will not move anywhere with our aspirations in the SDG. The second comment I would like to make is that are there things, this time it is a question, that are there things that we can do more deliberately, more innovatively, and in more specific ways to some of the dominant issues in the SDG? For example, poverty. I have a strong feeling, and I know this is shared by a lot of other colleagues here, that simply mainstreaming these SDGs into our routine, ordinary plans and frameworks and ensuring that we just do it business as usual may not deliver the aspirations we want within the time.
Thank you very much.
So please, I just thought you could educate me on those. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speakers should have one issue only. Yes.
Thank you. Superintendent of Police Bosco Arop from Police Senior Command and Staff College. My concern is about the cash out. I worked in one of the districts in Western Uganda. I don't want to mention the name. But there was an NGO that tried to bail out a group of people from removing them from the forest to come out. And they were giving them money. Now, whenever they would give them money, they go and deposit it in a drinking joint. Every day he comes, cut from what I have. Cut from what I have. So the money was diverted to something else. Again, I also worked in another district in Midwestern. People were compensated money. You know, washing goats with soda and giving goats.
So the challenge is on cash transfers, isn't it?
My concern is, if you are responding to food insecurity and you want food to be bought from those areas, first of all, you don't have food in that area. Now you're giving money to buy food in that area. Where are you going to get the food from?
Thank you very much.
Are there safeguards to address these other challenges that may be, the money may be diverted to something else? Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. Then this side of the house. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Chair. David Sekamate.
By the way, just as you come in, you can join the discussion on Twitter, and the handle is at UMI Uganda. Okay. Hashtag government and service delivery.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. I want to thank the presenters and the discussant for this wonderful presentation. I'm very much passionate about sustainability and SDGs, and I focus most of my research around SDG 13, which is on climate change. Dr. Byamugisa, I'm happy to see you, veteran evaluator. What is the role of academia, the role of education, especially in implementation of SDGs? And that is something that we need to discuss, and I don't know what your office is doing about this. Today I will be presenting a paper on UMI's experience in supporting implementation of SDGs and sustainability. But I think the role of education, because sustainability is a behavior issue. And so young people in schools, in universities, should be able to actually be able to understand what this is all about. Thank you very much, Dr. So you needed to think about that, and I would want you to comment on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. There is another hand here. Yes, Dr. Michael.
Thank you, Chairperson. I also thank the presenters. Chairperson, my comment is directed to Professor Byamugisa. Professor Byamugisa has actually ably described the institutional setup at the thrust of the SDGs. But you know, as always the case, normally the devil in the policy is in implementation. I am now terribly getting worried that if we are not careful, this SDG again may remain a boardroom concept. The ghosts that affect the implementation of the MDGs may come back to haunt us. Because, for example, most of the SDGs are supposed to be implemented and monitored at the local government level. By local government, most of them. But now, what have we done to empower, to mobilize, to organize the local government to be able to understand their stake and takes in implement these SDGs? Have we helped the local governments to be able to identify, the professor talked about partnership and then the dynamics, but what about identifying the teams and connecting them using common purposes for the different teams and the people within the teams to understand the nature of this partnership? At what point are we going to start seeing operationalizing of this partnership? 7 years is gone. We now have only 8 years remaining. So the same institutional capacity constraints that affected the MDGs, I now have a fear may come back to Michael.
Thank you very much. We have two. See, man, that hand has been up for a while. This one here.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. My name is Jennifer Aguti. I'm reacting to the presentation by the director from Red Cross. We thank you for the innovation, but then I would like to understand, because we know very well that in terms of the national identification registration processes, we still have many people in the countryside whose documents have not been aligned. You'll find somebody is having a phone, but then the NIN is reading differently from the name. You know, I think you get what I mean. So the fact that you're using telephones, using mobile money to transfer this money to the recipients, how are you able to ensure that the money is received by the right beneficiaries? And then the other issue of exploitation by the caregivers. You find the vulnerable person does not have the capacity to go and get the money. So you find maybe an uncle or somebody is helping the person. Don't such people take advantage of the vulnerable people? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Two more and we
Good morning, SDG Secretariat. Your boss indicates that life expectancy is increasing. As life expectancy increases, the old are increasing, and as part of Sustainable Development Agenda, we are going e-government. And one of the challenges that I see is that as we go e, no one is thinking about the aging. Thank you. What are we doing? Alex from UMI.
Alex Nduhura, thank you very much. Yes, please. And then the last one will be.
I am Ivan Tunomwez, and I am posing this particular issue to the discussant and Professor Gambuuze. In the 3 pillars of sustainable development, of economy, environment, and society, we are seeing that economy depends on society, yet society depends on environment to make the economy. And all of them have interest. But who is in society? Population. So are we seeing a challenge of intergenerational equity? Intergenerational equity, like the way how we are using resources today, do we see how the future generation will use them? So can we find a way of seeing the population? How can we improve? The challenge is the population. So Professor Gambuuze, what are we doing on the population to ensure that they can be in harmony with the 3 pillars of sustainable development? How is the country doing working on the economy? We seem to be interested on big numbers without emphasizing quality of the population. That is an issue which I want us
Dr.
to speak on.
Dr. Ivan, thank you very
you.
much. And lastly, at the back. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Joel Kitutu is my name. I'm a manager of Pilot Programmatic Partnership at Uganda Red Cross Society. Thank you, panelists. My question is to Professor Gambuuze. How best can we take stock of SDG implementation and hold ourselves, all of us, you know, from local to national, accountable to support more effective humanitarian action? That's my question to you, sir. Thank you
very much. And we are just 20 minutes past 10, which was supposed to be the end time. Yes.
I'm called Father Dan Uriema. My question is connected to the sustainable disaster risk management, in other words, directed to Robert. As a strategy for sustainable risk management, there has been also a global move towards drought-resistant crops and so on, so believed. And that is also connected with the ambition for, improved variety. But what we see on the ground sometimes is also connected with the disappointment of farmers regarding actually what they can receive. Many people invested also in this so-called improved variety, but the outcome of it is the disappointment that you get things that, cannot actually last, mangoes that dry faster, fruit crops that actually rot faster. And instead of creating the food security we were working for, we create the food insecurity we did not want. I don't know how we handle this as a country.
Thank you very much, Father Dan. Yeah. So I think let's come back, and since you were the first present, let's start this way and end with you. Yeah. You have anything to respond?
I'll try to be very brief, and I think some of the questions are helping us to perfect some of the innovations we have come up with. Professor, our discussant, mentioned something around how we are working with all the other various stakeholders, whether UNMA, whether it is the National Environment Authority. The efforts to make it coordinated and bring everybody on board are there. We could move faster, but that's the direction we are taking. And that in a way answers the question by the last person asked the question, Professor, I've forgotten the name, about the crops, either drought resistant or otherwise. So the whole question is, if we are looking at a holistic approach of this disaster risk reduction or early action, it touches almost every government sector, and agriculture is one of them. And so if we know droughts are going to be there, then what measures do we put in place to that effect? So I think the holistic approach, but for me, I bring it back to research. How does research help us and challenge those who are policymakers, those who are in office, who are making decisions, that some of the decisions can't work and they have to be adapted. So for me, it comes back to research, but also the coordinated approach. I think there was a question mentioned several times about cash. We are very mindful of cash and how we make sure it is not abused. For starters, there are cases where you can't use cash. It has happened. A disaster has happened. People are moving. The local markets are affected, so you can't give cash. So the elements of the relief can stay, depending on the situation. But we use cash alongside vouchers. And in a way that answers some of these concerns of those without the vulnerable people, those maybe without IDs. Because what we do is, depending on the situation, and that's where again critical analysis comes on board, then we either give cash, and even where we give cash, we combine it with what we call community engagement. The community becomes part of the decision making, even after the family, as to who receives the money. Is it the head of the house? Is it the mother of the house? If the man is a bit reckless, and how do you create harmony that they are not going to fight over this money? So we do what we call community engagement. But besides that, we employ what we call vouchers, where we can give a voucher and with the range of what you can buy. And then we retire them through those who are selling, the traders and the business people. So, but when it comes to those without IDs, and even we have refugees who are coming in and are being registered. So we use different tools. One is vouchers, I've mentioned, a departure from the cash. The other one is where we again go back to the same old style of relief, but which we are trying to minimize. Relief, even that's where corruption comes, that's why hand methods come. So as much as possible, we will try to minimize it. But the whole question of using the data, say from the UNHCR, like for refugees, but also doing head count, and at times it becomes unnecessarily complicated. But I would say these are tools we are constantly looking for ways of perfecting them. And one size may not fit all. I think the last comment which came to my attention is the one of data. we need to perfect tools of collecting data at where the problem is. You know, disasters happen in communities, not in Kampala, not in our offices. Now, if we don't have the tools, if we don't have community people, in Red Cross we call them Red Cross action teams, who predict, who become part of gathering data and informing us in time. I can give you an example. In Red Cross we have over 500,000 people all over the country. Even a small emergency, even someone fighting with his wife, we get the information. Because we have tried to position them to give all information relevant, that it can be processed and we take decisions. But we need to perfect it, and we need to perfect it with clear tools that work, but also tools that can make information transmission very fast. So again, an area, because unless we do it there, people in offices, people in decision making will always not take timely decisions or may not necessarily take the right decisions. And that's an area that needs further strengthening. I think basically that's all, and I thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have a number of course, questions and comments, and most I will combine them. Now, starting with James Awach, talking about partnership, where he's asking that what can we do differently from what we have been doing. And of course, what we can do differently, first of all, we should note that SDGs were adopted in 2015, and we started operationalizing them in 2016. And since that time up to 2018, definitely there was a coordination framework done by government, which brings on board all the state and non-state actors. But it was found out by the Auditor General when he was auditing Uganda's preparedness in achieving SDGs, discovered actually exactly what you are talking about, that we had a very good coordination framework, but not much had been done. And because of his recommendations, where government was able now to put a minister in charge of SDGs and the secretariat, which we are coordinating now to make sure that we coordinate all different partners. So when we talk of partnership, we are not talking of only the donors. We only think of donors bringing money every time, mainstreaming it in different ministries. No, that's not we are talking about. Of course, we are talking of donors, but with so many others. So partnerships we are talking about now, and in our institutional mechanism arrangements, the ones we are dealing with, we are looking at the people, the business people she was talking about, the private sector. We are talking of the CEOs. We are talking of academia. Academia, you are very much important. If you do research and advise the government which policies are working and not working, and you provide alternative solutions and you advise, I don't think government will sleep and say, this cannot work. So we are talking of the youth coalition. We have formed the coalition of the youth who are actually doing very well now and advising government in particular areas. And for the case of the donors, yes, they are supporting, but do we blame them? I did an evaluation on the loans which were given to Uganda for 15 years and presented it to cabinet. They were at Changwanzi in 2016. And they discovered that actually out of the money which we had borrowed, we still had 6 billion on the accounts. And the president said, we must now go deeper into this one here. We had the money which was lying and committing fees, interest and commitment fees being paid because there was not usage of that money. So why is the problem now? Is it the donor or it is us? So we have to establish that, and as you are aware, Cabinet has demanded that paper now, Prime Minister's office and finance to work on it and make sure that they establish the causes and then check on that one. So doing it differently, we must work with all the people to make sure that whatever we are doing is the right one, and we must not do business as usual. That's what Professor Betty was saying. We are always doing business as usual, the mindset. No? So we must change the way we are doing business. And of course, with academia, you are included because we are using 2 approaches: government approach, whole of government system, and citizen system And the system, that's why you include all other people whom we name non-state actors. And academia is number one, so we must pattern. And I was telling one of the organizers that definitely we must now work very closely with VMI. We have been working with Makerere University, representing all the academia. But we have very many universities, we have other research institutions, and they have produced very good such products which must be utilized. So we must work together. That is very, very important. The other one is on institutional setup, where we're talking about of course, now working with local governments. That's not correct, because when you look at the institutional mechanism of the coordination framework, at the bottom you start with local governments, then you go to the ministries, departments, and agencies who must be included, because they are the ones implementing the SDGs at the local level. The weakness before was that, of course, they were only hearing SDGs and they were not knowing that what they are doing is SDGs. But then now, with the creation of the Secretariat, we are working very closely with the local governments. We have created awareness to 80 local governments, and the remaining ones should be covered this year. And local governments have provided, now they have champions. The 80 ones who have visited, they have champions on SDGs who must be answering questions on the SDGs. And then definitely we must train them. And training them, we have developed a manual, localization manual, which they are going to be using, and we shall work very closely. We have also introduced what we call voluntary local reviews, where now the districts who have visited and who have trained review themselves after 6 months based on the indicators of the SDGs which are applicable in those districts. And when you look at the reports, they are amazing. And if we can cover the whole country, then that's okay. Then the other one is on e-government, and of course the e-government aging. I talked of digitalization, that is the way to go. And then of course working with all actors, including the youth, because they are the change makers for these SDGs, because it's not only us who are aged now, but the younger ones must be included. We must include the academicians, of course, that's where younger people are, and make sure that, of course, that one is, if that one is done very well, then they can also contribute to the achievement of SDGs. The other one, of course, of linking the economic, social, and environmental, talking of people, the population, education. Of course, we cannot blame the population. Government policy, of course, of introducing the universal primary education and the universal secondary education was one way of making sure that people who are not able to educate their children can be educated. And research has shown that some of the UPE children who started, some are professors even now. And if now we can bring together the parents, the community, working with the government, I think that can work out. So it's mindset change, again, going back to the community to make sure that we control the population. The government cannot do it alone without working very closely with the population, and I think they are doing that. But it's another area where all of us should be concerned. In the rural areas, people are producing every day. They don't care whether they will have to pay school fees or not. So we as academicians, we must also come on board and go down and educate these people that now we must make some limitations in that one. Then another one is, of course, how best can we take stock to SDGs. Actually, for the last 3 years, even during COVID, we have taken stock on SDGs. And of course, if you check on our website, sdgs.opm.ug.go.ug, you will get the latest progress report of this year on the 17 goals. And this is a report which was presented to Cabinet. And it was produced not by office of the Prime Minister only, but of course with other partners, including the civil society organizations. Now we are working with the CSOs. We have created a partnership. We have signed an MOU to work together. And it makes life easy for us to do research with those people. So if we add in also academics and the other partners, we should be able to provide information and inform government on where we are doing very well and where we are not doing very well. So taking stock is very important, and it will be done every year. That's why now Cabinet says every year we must have a conference. We had the first one in June this year on SDGs, where we started with regional forums, and then what came up from the regions informed the national conference, and it was the first time bringing on board the three arms of government: the Speaker of Parliament, the Chief Justice, and the executive. Now, that time it was represented by the Prime Minister. The President was out of the country, but all of them sat and they gave their views on the SDGs, and it was agreed that whenever we are working on this, all the three arms must be included. Because Chief Justice, of course, is the head of judiciary, but they are responsible for goal number 16. So if you don't include them, it can't work. The Speaker, of course, they pass budgets, etc. So all those arms must work together. So I think that's it. We thank you so much for having involved us, and we look forward to working with you, because there are solutions which can help us achieve SDGs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Albert. I think we have been within the main theme of this conference: sustainable service delivery, partnerships and innovations, and SDGs provide for us a global framework that we must adopt to our local situation. Disaster management is development work, because the investments in preventing disaster is development work. If you strengthen the banks of Nyamwamba River, which always ravages that area, that's development work. If you build a highway, hospital in Kiliandongo for accidents, that's development work. So development, disaster management is development work, and the investments there, the tools used are all development efforts. I happen to have published a book in this area, which was launched by the former President of South Africa, His Excellency Thabo Mbeki, in the last conference, and copies are available to those who are interested, and we can discuss. I thank you for your kind attention, and I now hand over back to the chairperson of the Scientific Committee. Thank you very much. And do mention people to go to the other theme of security, peace and stability.
We want to seek your indulgence for another 10 minutes. Please bear with us. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to borrow the protocol earlier used, protocol observed. We shall have two solidarity statements, one from APAM and another from the Inter-University Council of East Africa. And the two shall take 10 minutes. APAM 2, Inter-University Council of East Africa 8. But one announcement: all those doctoral students that were financed by the Inter-University Council of East Africa, you are required, as we go for the break, to spare a few minutes for a briefing. The APAM Solidarity Message. APAM cherishes its partnership with Uganda Management Institute. APAM is an international professional organization that promotes best practice, excellence, and professionalism in public administration in Africa through research, publications, training, seminars, and it has existed for the last 40 years, and it's affiliated to the African Union. Its membership includes African governments, corporate members, not only from Africa, and individuals globally. This is to invite you to, one, consider becoming members of APAM. Membership fee is $100. Two, attend the 41st APAM Roundtable Conference and Annual General Meeting scheduled for 6th to 9th December 2022 at the University of Cape Town, South Africa. Participation fees, $500 South Africans, $600 other countries, $400 accompanying spouse, and $200 students. Number 3 is not about dollars. APAM, the Uganda National Chapter, appeals to those of you who will travel for this round table to support the Ugandan sponsored candidate for the APAM presidency, Dr. John Nakabago. I am sure I've used the 2 minutes, and therefore I request Mr. Dr. Gavias Daizeye to come and use the remaining minutes. Thanks.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. All protocols observed. As they said, my name is Gervais Daizeye. I'm working at Inter-University Council for East Africa. I'm in charge of exchange programs officer, where our unit is dealing with the partnership. Actually, I was supposed to present yesterday, but we had some delegates from RDC, so we did not make it. And now they are giving only 5 minutes. Let's only not use a PowerPoint. I can maybe give a brief of Ageesigika by talking only. Actually, Ageesigika was created in 1963 when 3 countries started in a community that we call Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania. That's how even Ageesigika was established. But in 1970, when they withdrew from ESC, the Ageesigika continued. It's like how we have already abandoned Ageesigika as inter-university. But even though those countries have stopped to be in the inter-East African community, Ageesigika continued until 1974, when they resumed the East African community. Then Ageesigika became to real existence. We can say and hear that Uganda has been a pillar of that institution, which is a governmental institution composed by 7 countries today. We can say Uganda, Kenya, Rwanda, Burundi, Tanzania, South Sudan, as well as Democratic Republic of Congo. So those are countries which are financing Inter-University Council for East African Community. What mandate we have for Inter-University Council for East Africa is to advise all higher institutions in the matters of education within East Africa community. So for those 7 countries, we are developing all the norms and the standards for higher education in East Africa. I do believe that so many universities are already members of Ageesigika. We do have 137 universities which are already member of Ageesigika. We are waiting for other members to join. Yesterday, RDC were promised us that 1,048 universities which do exist in RDC will be joining Ageesigika. In the Congo, they have 1,048 universities. And so you can understand that when they come to us, the community is going to become too bigger. So what do we do for now? Actually, we are coordinating all the programs. We are seeking out we can harmonize the system in a way that somebody who is studying here in first semester, let's say at Uganda Management Institute, can be able to continue in Uganda, in Tanzania, another institution, in Kenya or somewhere else, because we believe that all the programs are going to be harmonized. So it will depend on each of us and the willingness we are putting in. When I came in, we're talking about Millennium Development Goal. which was focusing on education for all. Today, when it comes to sustainable development goal, they're coming to say that quality education. That's what we are fighting for as Ageesigika. So Ageesigika gives scholarships. We have some scholarships which are funded by donors. We have what we call KFW. It is funded by Germany. We have ASE2 and ESTRIP, which are funded by World Bank. We have also some scholarship from Asia, South Korea, a university which gives scholarship to partner states. They give 30 students per year. Then we choose 5 from each. I want to call attention of all vice chancellors who are here to imagine and understand. When Ageesigika was existing, we used to have this kind of scholarships where students from Tanzania could come to study here in Uganda, Kenya in Uganda, Ugandans, they go vice versa. But at one point, it stopped. It was a good system. And so, we had a meeting in Rwanda, 2014, when we said that we have to revive that kind of scholarships. So what are we advocating today? We are requesting all universities to give at least, I want to say, at least one student scholarship from partner state, which means that if we take Uganda Management Institute, they gave one student to a Burundian, to Tanzanian, Kenyan, from Sudan, RDC. Those are citizens who can come here to study under scholarships. And if that can work, we can have at least 858 students moving within a year. As Ageesigika, we can support those students with travels and insurances. Then universities can give only school fees and examination fees waiver. Then the parents can cater something. I think that can work. With that system, we can stop 100% begging scholarships from donors. We have our own institutions, then we can work for that. I think some of you have received letters from Inter-University Council asking you to commit for this saving system for scholarship to our partner states. As long as we educate our people, we become more stronger. The management of funds that we get from donors comes to us and to save, as they have been saying, vulnerable people. But why do we still having them around us? We don't have honest people to manage those funds. Honest people. Those are people we need to work out. And so by giving scholarships to those children, we'll be training them to help the community to grow. Then we have an important aspect to do. It's not only that we offer scholarships. We have another aspect which is very interesting: staff mobility. We do facilitate lecturers within partner state to go to one university to another, where Ageesigika, we support almost everything. When you go for staff mobility, we pay your air ticket or road transport, we pay insurance, then we give you stamps of at least, depending of your ranking, academic grade. Sometimes when you are a lecturer, we give you per month $1,000. When you are a senior lecturer, we give $1,500. When you are a senior associate professor, we give $2,000. When you're a full professor, we give $2,000. $2,500 USD per month. Why can't we take this knowledge we have here, then share with other partner states? We facilitate that movement under us.
And you have so many benefits on that. For this year, we have only managed to facilitate more than 34 professors who moved within. I think for Uganda Management Institute, I don't remember if there is one. University of Kabale, we have more than 6. Makerere, we have only 2. Other universities, I don't know what's going on. But we have those facilities. So what I'm requesting is to help Ageesigika, your institution. We are your servant, because the government body of Ageesigika are vice chancellors. So they tell us what to do. I would like to request everyone here to join our hands together and to request universities to apply and join to Ageesigika to be members. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Another round of applause for Ageesigika. The message was loud and clear. We took note. Thank you very much. We are going to have breakthrough from 11 to 11:30. Chairpersons and directors are requested to remember that the closing ceremony begins at 1. We appeal to you that as much as possible, end your sessions a 1:45 to allow the movements. Peace and security has been relocated to the Global Distance Learning Center Labs. For those of you who would like to attend that session, in that sub-theme, we shall guide you to where it is located. May I request you to be on your feet? We bless the breakfast, and then we come here at 1:45 in preparation for the closing ceremony. God bless what is ahead of us, both in terms of time and in terms of food, so that it now reaches us for the glory of your name and for the strength of our bodies. Amen.